Hey everyone, welcome back to video 3 of the argument series part 2. We spent the first part of this series reviewing what our argument papers are and how we can improve upon them, and then we spent the last video really focusing in on our audience, and we even worked it or decided to call that our fifth basic or our fifth element of writing because knowing your audience again extends past just an argument paper, but it extends to all of your writing. Now we're going to go over a few more things, a couple of um, minor things here and there, different ways to write, different ways to approach our writing in order to make our argument papers even stronger. One of these things, one of these ways to really make our writing stronger for argument papers, for persuasive papers, is to identify our claims and evidence. Now, this was something that we talked about a good bit, a decent bit, as our second point, is to use supporting evidence in order to back up our claims. But I really wanted to dive back into that because this portion, though it's similar to what we've been writing with our descriptive papers and our compare and contrast papers, it still has its own little nuances, its own particular things that make it different than, say, a descriptive paper. One thing that I want you to remember is that whatever you claim is what your big points are when you're writing. So if you're writing that Batman is a hero, then that is a claim. That's something that can fit into your overall thesis or your overall topic sentence that Batman is a good person, but this is also something that can be argued. Um, Batman is oftentimes described as a uh, vigilante, which means that he is someone who works outside of the law in order to bring people to justice. Right? Sometimes, say the movie The Dark Knight. I don't know if any of you guys have seen that movie, but there's a scene in The Dark Knight where Batman is interrogating some, you typical back alley thug wanting to get information on the Joker, and the thug is giving him a hard time. So Batman holds him over this railing and gets the guy to talk. And after the guy gets his information, Batman drops him off the railing. And the guy falls and his ankles break, and Batman goes on. Well, that's not necessarily the most heroic thing to do, depending on your definition of what a hero does, who a hero is. So, this is a point that can be argued. Your evidence would be citing actions that make Batman heroic, such as saving people from burning buildings like he does, particularly in The Dark Knight, or how he does ultimately put villains in jail. He always brings the Joker to justice, or Two-Face, or Mr. Freeze, or whoever else he happens to be fighting in that particular comic or cartoon or movie or whatever the case may be. These are things that you can cite. These are stats, these are examples, illustrations that you can cite in your paper to say that Batman is a hero because these are things that he does. You might want to address something like, yeah, he's a vigilante. Uh, he does sometimes push the boundaries of what could be acceptable heroic behavior or not, but even the actions that he does that might seem negative are ultimately done because he's doing it to really get at the villains and to make sure that um, he can bring the bad guys to justice. I don't know. But you guys get the point that whatever you identify as your big point, then that is your claim. If we go back to the way that we set up our outlines, right? We have our first point being the thesis. Our second point is going to be that first claim. So if our thesis is something like Batman is a good person, well then our first claim might be something like Batman is a hero, and then our evidence, again, things like saving people and arresting bad guys, right? And then our second claim would be something like, you know, Batman is charitable. And then you would come up with some sort of evidence where he gives away money. And don't cite me on that one. But you get the point. You get the big picture of what's going on is that Batman is a good person because he does these things. But this is your first claim, is that he's a hero. Well, heroes are good people. Charitable people are good people. And then this is how we prove that he is a hero. Giving away money is how we prove that he's charitable, right? So you have to kind of break it down into what relates to the next thing. A hero is a good person. Somebody who saves people and arrests bad guys, that person is a hero. And again, a hero is a good person. A person who's charitable is a good person. A person who gives away money is charitable. Now, let me focus in on this particular claim, because I know that this is an example, but I don't want you to mishear me or misrepresent what this example was. This example was just off the top of my head that I would flesh out if I were actually writing. To say that Batman is charitable and that he gives away money doesn't really tell us much. Now that Batman is charitable, that's a fine claim to make. That's perfectly fine. But all this piece of evidence is doing right now is saying he gives away money. So what we would need to do is to tell our readers where he gives or to whom he gives that money. So he gives away money to the Gotham Children's Hospital. Sure, I made that part up. Might be true, might be not. But what this does now is it gives our readers something to look up and verify for themselves, right? So people who are familiar with Batman, comics, cartoons, movies, etc., we know that he saves people, right? We know that he stops the bad guys. That's something that, again, writing to your audience, people know that. People know that about Batman. We've all heard of Batman. We might not have all heard of him giving away some sum of money to a Gotham Children's Hospital. We might not know that. So we need to know something that's verifiable. If this happened in a particular cartoon or comic or whatever. I know I'm spending a lot of time on this, but it's because at first the reason why this argument, Batman is charitable, he gives away money, is not strong is because you're saying the same thing. A person is charitable, that default definition is charitable with money. That's the default. So to say that he gives away money tells us nothing different. We need to know, at the very least, where he gives his money, because then we can fact check as readers, then we can double check and see what you're talking about. So that's something that I realized just writing up this quick example that I really wanted to focus on, because this is a very important topic, a very important thing to discuss. Now, that's claims and evidence. Another thing that I would like to talk about in regards to getting your argument papers even stronger, and a couple of tips and tricks to write about, are what we refer to as rhetorical strategies. Now, rhetorical strategies are strategies, the ways of going about things and approaching things that affect your writing, your rhetoric, right? So rhetorical becomes rhetoric, which then becomes how you write. There are a couple of different rhetorical strategies that we can use when we're writing, and there are three in the following slides that I want to talk about. You might have heard these before if you've taken, say, a debate class or some sort of speech class, and they are our three appeals, right? We talked about in our descriptive paragraphs the appeal to reason, or the appeals to our five senses, right? Taste, smell, sight, hearing, and feeling. Well, these are appeals to the way that we read our papers. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wind up cutting this video a little bit short, and we'll end on the rhetorical strategies because I want to be able to go fairly in depth on what each one of them is. And I don't want to cut one of them out. I want to be able to cover those three together in their own video. But yes, so we're going to talk about what a rhetorical strategy is and what it might look like.